morning, everyone. My name is Charlotte Strand. I am the Marketing Communications Manager for the Grains and Legumes Nutrition Council in Australia. So today we're joining us today, we've got the University of Sydney. We're going to be speaking to Angela Pattison and Aunty Kerrie Saunders today about Indigenous grains and how they have a place in the Australian food ecosystem. So we're really excited to be talking about this project with Angela and Kerrie, particularly because we're seeing an interest in Indigenous ingredients play a profile in Australian shelves in the supermarket, but also, you know, looking at grasslands and how we can start integrating these grains into Australian diets. I will hand over to Angela and Kerrie, and they can do an intro on themselves and the project they're working on. This session will be recorded, and if you do have any questions throughout, we'll be doing a 10 to 15 minute Q&A at the end. Please use the Q&A function down the bottom. To start things off as well, I'd like to recognise the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on in Perth, Western Australia, which is the Noongar Whadjuk people. Welcome, Kerrie and Angela. Really fantastic to have you here.
Thanks, Charlotte, and it's good to see everybody.
Yep, likewise. It's nice to be here today and talk about the native grains and a beautiful topic.
Great. I'll kick things off to you, Angela. I'm just going to hide my screen and things, and I'll pass it over to you.
Yep, not a worry. And we'll do a little intro, and then we'll play a video, and we've got some photos to share. But like Charlotte said, everyone, please do put questions in the Q&A function. We actually probably won't talk for too much of our time. We would prefer to be able to interact and ask questions with the group. This is a system that's got a lot of curiosity, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's a system. It's not just about facts and data and a commodity. It really is about a system, an ancient system that's very precious and something that we want to get right. And that takes a lot of people, and that's why we work very closely together and with a bigger team as well. So what we'll be doing today is really having a chat, having a yarn about how we can bring these foods back to our diets and back to hill country. So would you like to do an acknowledgement of our country as well, or a welcome before we go any further?
If you like. My name's Kerrie Saunders, and I'm a Kamilaroi, Gomeroi woman from Moree, and I'm also a technician on the native grains with the Sydney, on the native grains, the grasslands, Indigenous grasslands for grain at Sydney University. And it's been a wonderful project. And happy to talk about what we do here through university, and also the connection that the Gomeroi people have with these grains.
Yeah. And we are coming to you from Gomeroi country, which is northwest New South Wales. And we would like to acknowledge the elders of the country that we're coming to you from, and pay our respects also to the elders of the countries that everyone listening is also coming from. And it's so wonderful to be able to do this across Australia, isn't it?
Thank you, Ange. That's correct. Yeah.
It really is a teamwork. We work very closely with the community here, and also within a few hours drive. So again, we're from Sydney University, but we're not coming to you from Sydney. Sydney University has a campus up in Narrabri, so that's where we're coming to you from, and that's where most of the on-country work for this project is happening. And it's so important to do these sorts of things in context. So this research isn't a lab-based project at all. It really is paddock to plate. The way this project started was a few years ago. I moved to Narrabri from Sydney, and I was quite surprised why there wasn't any research happening about the local foods. And I read Bruce Pascoe's book, and I was very inspired by it, and thought, wow, well, if there's anyone that's going to do some research on it, we should just do it. So we spoke to the local community up here and said, look, the University of Sydney has a campus here. We have a whole lot of research on grains. They're just not the native grains. And we have a lot of research on food, including legumes, including wheat, including rye and triticale and oats and barley. And we do breeding and we do research, we do agronomy. We have a food lab here, but none of it's to do with the local produce. And so we started that conversation with the local community. If we were going to do something, what would you guys like to do? And so we had a big yarn, we had a meeting and a follow-up meeting, and it just sort of evolved from there. And that was the first meeting was in 2017. So we're 5 years in, and a lot of the work's been done as passion projects on the side of other projects. But as passion projects go, they don't die when they're your passion, do they?
No.
And we've finally gotten to a place where we really have some momentum and some genuine data that we're very happy to share today. But again, we really love questions, and we're really not going to talk too much about facts. It's really about a system and about working together, country, its people, and the food system. So we've got a video. I'm really hoping it doesn't crash my computer. I apologize in advance if it does, and I will come straight back if it does, I promise. I'm going to have a go at sharing my screen. And please someone shout out at me if you can't either see it or hear it as we play. All right, here we go. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, hopefully you can see us again. So Aunty Kerrie made that video about the paddock to plate. Do you want to chat a little bit about the country and grains on country?
Yeah. So out on Gomeroi country, we've got you can walk out on country and find like a living ecosystem with different 15 different native species of grain, whether they're grasses or plants or from trees, some of the mulgas. So we're not just collecting one, we're collecting a variety at a certain time, and different species have different shapes and sizes, and all. They also got a name. So and that name is also a connection of something else that's that is part of the natural surroundings of the living ecosystem. So it becomes the storylines with other connections of other species that's there. And that's the way the old people maintain and manage these grasslands for years. So it was just the species that are on there and how they interact with everything else, and how the old people maintain that today.
And it really is an ecosystem, isn't it? It's quite different to the monoculture style of growing crops, like a sorghum or a wheat, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely different. You're not just getting one species, you're getting the whole range of species that, like I said, whether they're from grasses or plants or from trees, and the pretty butterflies and everything else that's there as well, that's connected in one way or another.
One of the clips in the video was of Kerrie and a couple of young guys and Uncle Les out there hand cutting some native millet. I don't know if you noticed, there was a big orange triangle in the background, and that's because our research field is physically located right next to a commercial crop, and so it's crop rotated. But when we took that video, that was sorghum, so there was a big sorghum crop right next to the native millet. And we do the research up here in context like that, so we can really see how is this going to fit into a modern this ancient system. How can it fit with modern food production? Because if we try and just break it down into its component parts, it's not going to succeed, because this is something that has to be connected from the paddock all the way through to the plate in a system where we've got to deal with money, we've got to deal with business, and we've got to deal with economics and legal structures and things like this. So as much as we would love to just have it, as a little demonstration garden in the schools and for people to look at and go, oh, that's nice. We don't want it just to be a token. We don't want it to be something that's small and just to look at. We really want it to be something that everybody can have either on their farm, so it heals country, or on their plates and in their diets, and so it's good for their body, and something that's not exclusive for the rich of the rich that can afford to pay for fancy food. It's not going to be like a token, it's going to be something normal. And that's what it was for the old people, right? This was everyday food.
Yeah, absolutely. The native grains was a big part of their diet, with it full of nutrients in it. So what was other plants that grow amongst these grasses that are also good for the soil, even though you don't eat them, but one way or another they're there to keep something else growing and maintain the health of the soil. And it's just like two peas in a pod kind of thing. They do very well with the variety that's meant to be there.
So what would you say are some of the challenges, Kerrie, with working with the food ecosystem as opposed to a monoculture crop, whether it's horticulture or agriculture? We got just one species and you weed out all the other species, so you got one. How do you think we can manage on country a field where you've got many different species, all edible, but many of them at once?
So yeah, I've walked out in the country and managed to harvest when the time is right. Yeah, collect the grains that was in season. There's different ways of collecting because they're not all the same height. Some of the grains grow in plants along the ground, some grow in grasses, and so yeah, there's two different techniques of harvesting these grains, and also when you go to separate, clean the seed, separate the seed from the husk. They're different shapes and sizes, so they all require their own technique of threshing. So yeah, there's different ways of doing that as well. Everything's not the same like you just normally do with wheat. And yeah, so but the nutrients, like I said, these grains have been around for a very long time, and that's the way we've done it. So yeah, that's an interesting topic, to find something that'll go without, still maintaining country, if there's something out there that can do the job without destroying other things, that's already there grown to benefit the other one. Yeah, it'd be interesting because it's really, they need one another in some way. Yeah. And for the me and my people, my community, it's keeping, it's a part of who we are. It's our livelihood. It's keeping, the language and the story and the connection of our law, of how we manage things. That's the way the old people done it for a long time. But yeah, to have it done in modern, yeah, it'd be interesting. Yeah, I'd like to find out one day if there was an easier way of processing, without, like I said, still maintaining country, because it's important that, why you can go out there and get a variety of seeds and still maintain them. But it just takes a little work the way I'm doing it now, or the way we're doing it now. Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out if there's another way.
Yeah, and because there are lots of different ways of achieving just getting some grain at the end of the day. And we could grow, for example, native millet as a monoculture, just like wheat is, or we could grow weeping grass or button grass. You could put it in as a monoculture crop and harvest it with a header and find out the right way to process it. So you've got one species and get a really commodified product, and that would definitely be the cheapest, most efficient way of doing it. Some groups, that's their prerogative. Maybe they will choose to go down that route, and that's the way they would like to produce these grains in the future. And there's lots of options. People can choose how they want to do it. I think where we've tried to position our research project is to really help find a way to not have to do it that way. It is an option, and obviously there are great reasons why we've commodified things like wheat and barley and whatever, and legumes, chickpeas, because we need to feed the world. There was a lot of hungry mouths out there that we need to feed. And so it might seem like going backwards a little bit to say, actually, we don't want to produce as much per hectare as we possibly can. We want to do this differently. So we're very conscious of that this isn't the answer to the world's food security. It's a different way of thinking about production on country. There are, as much as there are advantages of commoditizing and efficiency, there are also disadvantages. And we see that this system, we might be able to bring some balance and do things a bit differently in a way which will sequester carbon, increase biodiversity in our food systems, as well as allow, like you said, the different plants that depend on each other to all be growing in the same place, and still find a way to, and it's tricky, harvest them and process them in a way that we can get it to market, and so people can still afford to pay for it. And it's a challenge because doing things in a polyculture typically means more labor. which can be good for people that want to connect to country and want to live on country. So there are advantages to being able for the social system, being able to provide more employment, for being able to live on country and do a culturally significant enterprise, being part of something where you're working with your hands again, being connected to the land. But there's also makes it more expensive the more labour you have in any sort of system. So being able to find that balance.
Yeah, that's right.
Is where we're trying to position this project. And that's why in our description of this talk, we talk about the three-pronged sustainability: economics, environmental, and also social/cultural, because it's all connected together.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So, I was going to say something there, Ange. Okay, you can keep talking. I'll figure it in a minute.
One of the challenges that we identified pretty early in doing this research, when we tried to do it from the paddock to the plate, was what we call threshing is really, really tricky. So conventional crops like wheat have been bred for literally thousands of years to make them easy to thresh, and that is to separate the husk from the grain. And so recently it's done mechanically, but even historically it's been done with machines just powered by horses or by people. And even today, overseas, people still manually thresh wheat. You might have seen photos of people throwing it up in the air, and it separates the grain from the husk. But these native grains, partly because they're perennials, haven't had breeding to make them as easy to thresh as conventional crops have. And so we've identified that if the research is going to be able to help, one of the most important things is we have to find a way to process these grains, separate the husk easily. And like Kerrie said, every grain is different. It has a different shape and a different size. So just like maize is different to rice, which is different to wheat. And then also if you include the legumes, which is different to field pea, which is different to lentils, which is different to chickpeas. It's the same. The native grain species, there's roughly 15 of them that we work with that provide an edible output of grain, that they have different shapes and sizes, so they need different methods to process them. So traditionally it would have involved fire, it involved rubbing, it involved rubbing with feet and hands, which are soft. Sometimes rocks were included, which is hard and abrasive. And so what we're trying to do also is go, okay, well, that was, for that species, that was how it was done in the past. What tools do we have in the modern society that can replicate what's appropriate for that particular species? And we'll show you some photos in a minute of some of the species that are easy versus hard to thresh, and why not that might be the case.
Yeah.
Should we look at some photos?
Yeah.
Or do you have anything?
Oh no, we can show them some photos of some grain.
Okay. Let's do it. Hopefully, again, my computer can handle it. We're doing okay so far. Okay. So we'll show you some wheat for context, and also partly why I wanted to show photos of these is also to talk about how the threshing links to nutrition. Very conscious you guys are all nutritionists and you're involved in the food system somehow, so I want to try and connect what seems like a job that's done in the shed or on the farm to the impact that that has on the nutritional benefits or content of the species. So to get your eye in, this is a photo of wheat. I've got all of these grain samples in the same little jars. So that's typical bred wheat grain. This one here is one of the most commonly used native grain species across Australia, from the deserts to the coast. This one was common. Kerrie, do you want to talk about its name and its use?
Oh, okay, so the scientific name is Panicum decompositum, and the common name is native millet, but the Gomeroi Kamilaroi name is Guli, and it's a native grass. It's very common around here. Like Angela said before, it's spread out a little bit more. And this one here, so it's an easy one to kind of thresh. So yeah, by rubbing it off the stalks is a good way of threshing it. Yeah, and you know, the seeds are very, very, very tiny, but they do make up, say, quantity as you keep on collecting the grasses. You'll realise that you'll have, you know, a few more seeds as you collect. So it goes on how much you collect, really, to get a good, you know, good summer seed to make something with. Yeah, so that's that one.
Yeah. And I'm sure people watching could immediately think of the impact that such a small seed would have on the nutritional content, let alone the genetics, like just straight out physical size. Bigger, well, the ratio of bran to endosperm in a smaller seed means that there's a higher proportion of basically bran and all the goodness that comes from bran. So the minerals and the enzymes as well that are in the bran also impact the fiber content. There's basically a lot more of that than the starch. That does also, of course, have an impact on the functional properties of the food, but in terms of its nutrition, very high in bran content. Also a bit higher in protein content. And I'll flick back so you can compare. That's the size of a wheat grain. That's the size of a native millet grain, for comparison. Yeah, big difference. Next species.
Oh, okay. So this one here is Astrebla lapasa, and it's native Mitchell grass. And the Gomeroi name is Ganalay, and it comes from one of our native grasses as well. And yeah, so this one here, yeah, there's a little bit more different way of threshing than the other one. The other one you just had to rub, but this one here, it's in its florets, so you can't just rub the florets and hope the seeds will come out, because there's another technique you got to use to get the seed out of the florets. And so the old people would have, you know, naturally grind these on the stone, and there was another source of releasing the seed. The tools we got today do it as well. So, and that's very successful. But all in all, it's one person getting this grain is just, yeah, it works. The labour's definitely there. But if people wanted to, you know, learn these skills and have a few people actually working on these tools to get the grain, that will be a bit more successful. Maybe to make some flour, whether they cook or sell in a little small area, you know, if you had a small business, maybe just a few jars of flour at a time. But on a bigger scale, yeah, you'd be wanting something more. But in all, again, that grows with millet, and also the other species that we collect. So, yeah, you know, to get it from paddock to plate is still labour in collecting it. The way majority of the time we do it just the way the old people did it. So, yeah, that's getting it from the paddock to a plate is, yeah, still haven't thought of that one.
Yeah.
Oh, we do think a lot. But yeah, just haven't come up with something at the moment.
This one, the photo on the left, that's the florets, and the one on the right is the seed. So you can just imagine, if you look at the photo on the left, you think, oh, those grains are just as big as wheat, but the seed's actually roughly the same size as a native millet seed. It's just covered in this really large lemma and palea with awns and little really irritating hairs on them. So we always have to wear a mask when we're threshing this, because otherwise you're within 30 seconds you're coughing and spluttering, and yeah, it's not healthy for you. So these grains, yeah, it's very different. They're very precious. It takes a lot of work to get them, and so that's the native millet there, partially unthreshed in that sample there that I've got. And then this is the threshed versus, or the unthreshed versus the threshed Ganalay. So you can see, like Aunty Kerrie said, different techniques of being able to separate them. But the degree of purity also has an impact on the nutritional content of the final product, doesn't it? So if you completely thresh it, it will cost more money and more labor to do that. The more pure you get, the more time it takes and more labor.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you leave a little bit of the husk in there, it increases the fiber content, the cellulose content of the product, which, you know, it's all about, it'll be a balancing act for the marketing of these sorts of things, won't it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like how far do you have to take it?
Yeah, absolutely. And these the Guli and the Mitchell, they do grow differently as well. Where the Guli, come along and just take what you need. Same with the Ganalay, but it grows over. So there'll be, it's just two different techniques how to collect it as well.
That's true.
The back straightened up, or you want to leave down.
Yeah,
because
that's true.
The Ganalay grows over. It tilts over when it's time to collect it. Where the Guli on the stalk just is straight. So you sort of put your body into another position.
Yeah. And there's a lot of evidence that the Guli, which is a bit easier to harvest and definitely easier to thresh, was very widely used across Australia. Plenty of reports. Absolutely.
There's places where you just see Guli. So that's a good one to have it grown in an area where there's lots of it, and I've seen it, and it's a good one to collect and thresh. Yeah, absolutely.
Compared to Mitchell grass, which there's less reports, less recordings of people talking about it being used, but we know it's just for some reason, and we think it's partly related to its threshability, but we also think there's another reason. And the word Ganalay, would you be able to talk about the word Ganalay and what it means, its connection to the body?
Yeah, it's like the root of the whole. So it's like the Ganalay is like it's like liver. It's the main organ. It's one of your organs to the system of when this grain was analysed for nutrients, it come back with good 25% more protein than wheat, with good gut health properties. And so in the Kamilaroi language, it's liver.
So I think that's just amazing that the old people knew the benefits of work, even though this species is hard work and hard to thresh.
It
was worth it because gut health.
It's amazing that was, because when you come back with your recordings and said that, and the old people were right. So you got the culture knowledge and the scientific and the culture all in the one. So
because what Kerrie's referring to is we've done a fairly comprehensive nutritional analysis on the 15 species that we think have potential to be used in a modern market. There are multiple replicates from different collection sites, and the results are going to be published soon. But both us and other universities that have done Mitchell grass have come back with a protein content between 20 and 25% each time we've done the samples, which is really incredible because that's as high as a legume, but this is botanically a grass species. And when you look at the seed, you can see the germ. The germ is quite a big part of these little seeds. And it's something like native millet. The protein content of that was high. It was kind of the 17-ish range. Well, higher than wheat anyway. But Mitchell grass being as high as a legume, when we saw that, we were like, oh, no way. And then somebody else corroborated it, and then we did another sample from another place, got the same thing. And so it's that scientific knowledge working hand in hand with what the old people knew, was that this particular species somehow had a lot of human health benefits, so much so that the language connects to the species, which connects to its use, which connects to people.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. So for this, the species that's benefited for the soil, it's been there all the time, and it's good for the country. Good for people.
Okay, we've got a couple more photos. So this one's button grass. Do you want me to talk for a bit?
Yep.
Interrupt at any point. So Aunty Kerrie calls this one bare yulu, which means jump claw, because this is a very low growing species, and it when you touch it, when it's ready for harvest, it kind of jumps off and it flicks its florets off the plant. Makes it tricky to harvest if you're not doing it at the right time. And timing is absolutely everything with these species, because they haven't had any breeding, so they behave the way you expect. They do what they want to do when what they see is right for country and for the weather, and you've got to fit around them. And button grass is no exception. So if you can get in there at the right timing and catch the little florets, they're actually quite easy to separate from the husk. And what you're seeing there are these tiny, tiny, tiny little seeds. The biggest challenge with this one is separating it from the sand. So this is a very low growing species. And so often when you're collecting it, because you're so close to the ground, and this is whether you're doing it by machine or by hand, the sand grains are on the plants and they get into your sample, and they're physically very hard to separate because they're physically the same size. So again, that's part of the research at the moment. How can you make a marketable product? It's this processing bit in between the paddock and the flour, how you thresh it and separate it, in this case, from the sand. Here's another species that is also very low growing, but botanically it's not a grass, but it's used in a very similar way in food products, or traditionally has been. This one's purslane or pigweed, and Dhamu is the Gomeroi word for it. But it's actually a species that's found in many countries around the world. So it's a traditional medicine in China. It's used in curries in India. It's used in the Middle East and into lower Europe. And if you Google purslane recipes, the first one that comes up will be a Greek salad with purslane in it. And so it's a species that's known around the world for being really good and a good food. And I think we're crazy for not eating more of it. And this is the grain of it. Very, very, very tiny. It looks just like poppy seed, and interestingly, it has really interesting health properties that are actually quite similar to linseed or poppy seed, doesn't it?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, this one, the whole plant's actually healthy. It's probably the healthiest plant on the planet. So you can eat the leaves and the stems and also the seeds. And so the Dhamu, it's just like poppy seed. So this is another way of collecting the Dhamu. It grows along the ground, and timing is also everything for this one. The way you collect it is different to the grasses, but it has been done by hand. And then back to the threshing shed to separate it. So it was just a lot of sitting and winnowing, and then you'll come up with clean seed, and then very healthy.
It's full of omega-3 fatty acid, isn't it?
Yep. Very good.
It's very good for women's health. It's again, we haven't done the research on the Australian genotypes of it. Well, the university is just doing it now, and I'm sure others are probably looking at it now as well. There's a colleague down at Charles Sturt actually is doing some, and the omega-3 fatty acid content in this plant is very similar to linseed. It's one of the highest plant-based sources of omega-3 fatty acid, as well as it's got all other sorts of goodies in it. So great for vegetarians that don't want to have fish oil, but also just it's great to incorporate in everyday diet because it's super healthy. And again, it comes back to that system. And if we can find a way to, in the field, grow this as an ecosystem, not a monoculture, it would just be so good, because you can have these growing really low, which are not a grass, next to the grasses that feed the ants and the butterflies and and then all the little mammals that get involved as well. And it's about bringing back a system of being able to produce something that's super duper healthy, and finding a way to do it that's economically viable, which is, again, if we said the challenge. I've got one more seed picture here to show you, again, for comparison. Knowing this is the Grains and Legume Nutrition Council, had to put a legume in here. Wattles or acacias are legumes. and again comes with higher protein content seed, and this is no exception. But the Acacia aneura, which is Mulga, is a tree, or it's a large shrub, if you like, but it does grow in grasslands.
Yep.
And so we've called the project Indigenous Grasslands for grain, not just grasses for grain, because the grain can come from things that are botanically not grasses, but would grow in a grassland ecosystem.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, and legumes are a really important part of the growing system because they input nitrogen into the soil.
Yep, that's right. And with the Mulga seeds, they come in like a bit of a pod kind of thing. So yeah, you're just collecting from the trees, and then you got to separate again. Yeah, it's a beautiful. It's like a spice, sort of you can make a drink out of it, or you can have it in cakes and stuff like that. So it's a really nice one to have.
Yep. And there's quite a bit of research being done, and there's continuing to be done on the acacias. So our project doesn't do too much on the acacias because we know others are already covering that. But this one's a lot easier to find information about, particularly its nutritional content. So it's about the system being able to find a way, even though we know they're healthy for both the country and for people, find a way to make the system work so that we can get it from country onto people's plates, that paddock to plate, and connecting the economics and the businesses with the right cultural oversight to do it in a way so that people's knowledge gets acknowledged and respected. And then in a way that means that we can all benefit.
That's right.
Okay, let's look at some food photos. What do you reckon?
Oh, yes, yum.
Then we'll go to questions. I'll skip through these fast so we have time for questions. So these are what we call Johnny cakes. So the one on the left and the middle are native grains, and the one on the right is self-raising flour, for a bit of context. I'm pretty sure they were mixed, the one on the left and the middle were mixed with self-raising flour as well. But you don't have to just bake them over hot coals. So this is in the bread maker. One on the left is Mitchell. The one on the right, for memory, is weeping grass at about 16%, 15 to 20% roughly native to stone ground wheat in the bread maker. Very versatile, as you can see. It makes a fine loaf of bread. It's delicious. But you don't have to do those. So there's bread rolls. Those ones have Mulga on the top. The round rolls are weeping grass. The knotted rolls are Mitchell grass. The one at the top, that one's a loaf of bread that was baked in an oven. The one down the bottom is a focaccia. Is that right? Ricotta focaccia. Kerrie made that one. Those ones are sourdough loaves on the left. On the right is a scone. You can be healthy or you can be super unhealthy. So the ones on the left, I just adapted a lemon poppy seed recipe, and we used lemon myrtle with Dhamu seed plus native grain flour plus some wheat flour and sugar and all the unhealthy things as well to make those muffins. The one in the middle is a brownie with native grains as well as acacia. And then the one on the other side there, rock cakes, again, native grain flour. Can go savoury as well. So the top are crackers with saltbush flour. The one down the bottom, that's my daughter who made a really big cracker, cheesy cracker with cheese and saltbush flour and purslane seeds and hidden carrot, hidden veg, really important for the kids. And then that's Kerrie's pizza.
That's the bush pizza.
And you can see she's put on the top
cheese. That was the only thing bought in the shop.
So much cheese. But yeah, the bush tomato, little berries.
And a little bit of normal flour mixed with native grain flour. And yeah, so you got the crushed up the bush tomatoes, little spices, and then your native greens. Like they also out there growing. Your salt bush and your galangaland, your spinach.
Yep. It's delicious. Especially fresh out of the oven. And yeah, so there's a crepe on the left and some Indigenous guys mucking around with some pancakes. I think they were fiddling around with the recipe trying to get they had kangaroo grass mixed in with those pancakes there. And we do a lot of workshops for kids and high schoolers and a lot of public workshops, and have so much fun doing it, because there's nothing better than stopping and eating together. That's when you really get to know each other and you have a yarn and come together.
Yeah, absolutely. And they get to know where it comes from. And when they look at their natural surroundings, they know, you know, what things are. And people love it. They just love learning about their own natural surroundings and knowing what you can do with it. Yeah, it makes people, it's a feel-good feeling.
Absolutely. Okay. Charlotte, would you like to facilitate the Q&A, or would you like us to do that?
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
Fantastic presentation. It's really interesting seeing, I suppose, the size of the seeds and the grain compared to traditional wheat and what that nutritional content is as well. And I know, you know, even when we've spoken previously about even a lupin project, for example, the nutritional profiling is so varied and different compared to what we are used to in those monocultures. I did have a question. So in the food pictures and things, you were talking about mixing with traditional flours. Is that kind of where you see the natural progression of these seeds and grains, is that if it was to be integrated in the food system, it'd be more fortifying with, you know, that Australian grain to really boost up the nutrient profile, as opposed to completely replacing traditional flour?
Yeah, well, it works. You know, having that percentage of both is a beautiful thing, I reckon, and it works. So people get to it goes a long way as well. With the native grains, and it's putting the nutrients back into some normal flour, and you're, you know, looking after, you know, your natural surroundings, as well as you know, people are still growing some wheat, so it's yeah, you got the so, you know, the both still happening, which is a good thing. And people love that. You know, we do that quite often, just to make up the grain, and you can do that with native grains. You can have just a quantity of it, because it's not overpowering when you've got the normal flour in there as well. So you make that right measurement, and it's it's nice.
Yeah. If you think about how native fruits are blended in, something like a native lime or a quandong, you know, if you buy quandong ice cream or whatever, it's a tiny little bit of quandong, and it, you know, we probably want to get to a place where it's not a tiny bit, it's a bit more than a tiny bit, so that you can really get the nutritional benefits from eating it. Because if it's, you know, if it's like 0.5% of your final product, it's not really getting any nutritional benefit out of it. Might benefit the growers, but not really either the country or the person. But there does have to be a balance, doesn't there?
Yeah.
Because if you go too much, the taste is really strong and it's unfamiliar to people. Like any healthy food, think about having 100% quinoa or 100% chia or 100% buckwheat flour. If you're not used to it, usually the product isn't very appealing. It's just getting used to it. And the other side of it is also the expense. So if you go 100% native flour, the product at the moment will be prohibitively expensive. We really want to find that balance where we can really incorporate it in a way that's accessible to everybody.
Yeah, great. Okay, we've had a couple of questions come in. One question was around the Mulga, and Rosemary Stanton has asked, in previous publications, the figures of iron for the Mulga have been extremely high. Is this still relevant or valid?
Relevant? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, what would you like to comment on Mulga?
I just find that Mulga is a really, really nice seed. It's got a nice flavour to it.
Yep.
I class it as a spice. So, you know, and people love cooking with spices, and it's just a natural organic spice that you can go out and collect off a tree, you know, roast it and ground it up, and you can, you know, again, add it to flour, and it changes the flour completely. It just takes it to another level of goodness, and you can taste it. It's just like tasting the taste of Australia. Yeah, and yeah, so it's beautiful. You can also make a drink with it.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
I think I'd like to see,
when you've said taste of Australia, I just pictured it immediately, Kerrie. I know exactly the flavour that you're talking about. I think it is such a distinct flavour as well, and it's really interesting seeing a few people in the cracker category, especially already, you know, divulging into native flavours from, I suppose, what we're familiar with. So using lemon myrtle and bush tomato because it's that easy lean in, but it'll be really interesting to see how many brands are starting to pick up, you know, maybe flavours that we don't know.
Yeah.
We had another question coming in asking if you've seen, and perhaps studies haven't been done yet, any allergies to these native grains or sensitivities?
No, not as of yet, but we always make it aware when we do have workshops and, you know, talking about the native grains. We always talk about, you know, allergies, if anyone got any allergies. But we're still new into this. You know, people are still, you know, we turn them into a flour or a spice. So, like I said, even though the old people lived for thousands of years, and you know, with the oldest living culture in the world, not that I know of, but we always make it aware. You know, there's things in the shop you can buy that might have allergies, and you just always make sure that, you know, peanut butter, or there's, you know, like, yeah, so you just, it's always awareness with different foods, especially when people never tried them before. But we get a lot of good feedback on people wanting to try, and they have tried it and they just love the flavour. There's a certain one that they like and they'll go for that one. So, you know, there's, yeah, so.
And the processing method also might have an impact on the food safety as well. And part of that is understanding and listening to the traditional knowledge of how people used to process species to try and make sure they're safe.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know anyone that's been allergic to anything we've fed them, but gosh, I hope,
yeah,
I hope we're not making people sick.
No.
But you're absolutely right. Food safety is so important.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure that people are, we test this right, but that's not my area of speciality.
So far, so good.
Great. Love that. And my final question is, where to next? So we've got the paddocks going. You're working out how to, you know, dehull these seeds and these grains. How do we get them into the shelves?
That's a good one. Getting the right people. You know, we always work, you know, making it awareness with communities, what we're doing here at the Sydney University, and you know, working with them is so important because they got the connection as well as to the stories and to the you know, the name. And I personally do little bush tucker tours in Moree when I'm not with Sydney University, and what I find that when people come on my tours, they want to you know, learn from the real deal. You know, someone that's from there, and you know, like we've already got people selling Mitchell, and that's fine. I don't, you know, everyone's allowed. I mean, people can grow it. You know, that's keeping the planet healthy and stuff like that, bringing the carbon emissions down. But I'll sell it under Ganalay. Ganalay's, you know, the name for me. You know, coming back from my community, and it's going to have a story, you know, on the label. So when people come to buy, they want to buy off the real deal. You know, they want to buy the whole connection, the story, the name, and and I think that's what people like.
Being able as a research project to speak to people in community and find out what their aspirations are for what they think they can achieve. That's part of what a research project does. It's our job to listen to things like that, and people that want to find a way to market it under however they want to do it. And it's a researcher's job. We support them. We've got to do research that's relevant to country and to people. It's always a temptation to come up with a great idea as a researcher and go and apply for funding and then get your funding and then realize you've done something that's helpful but not the best. And I think where to next is really, it's about listening first before doing anything, and then working on how we can make a system that you can't make everyone happy, but as best we can integrates everyone into it going forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see where to next. I'm really excited to see where this project goes. I know, you know, there's really no look onwards of it slowing down. I think people are becoming more aware of it, and you're doing such fantastic work. And Kerrie, when I'm up in your area, I'm going to come for a visit and you're going to take me on a food tour, and I cannot wait.
Absolutely. Yep. You can make a booking whenever you feel like it.
Great. You can make me one of those pizzas, but I'll need more cheese on it than you've done.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's okay. I'll put more cheese on it for you.
Thanks. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you found the session as insightful as we did. Again, the session will be recorded, so if you have any questions post the webinar, please let me know, and I'd be happy to pass them on to Angela and Kerrie. Thank you so much again. It's been a real pleasure having you on today.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.